All right, we're going to jump into this conversation with who we have in here, and I would like to invite our panelists to the front if you're able. Thank you for taking time, and thank you all for your patience. Uh, Councilman Eugene Green is outside. And come on in, brother. You see, this time, but you could definitely part of the conversation. It appears that this will be a bridge in conversation.
You're not coming to Bethany? Huh? Bethany for the pantry cooking? Yeah, in October. 12:30. You know what? Hold on. Give me a second. I'm gonna text you back.
And if everybody can test your mics. All right, well, let's first of all thank each and every last one of you who are in this space. For those of you in the back, please feel free to come up a little bit. That way we don't feel like we have to yell even in the microphone. It's totally up to you, but we certainly want to make this a family conversation. My name is Eugene Boger. I serve as the pastor here at Bethany United Methodist Church. This celebration today, or festival today, is a combination of wanting to create a little bit of fun day for members and residents in the Pontchartrain Park community, but in light of Juneteenth, but we didn't want to just have fun and food and music. As I have been reminded as a new resident in New Orleans, we don't need an occasion or a special occasion for food and music. We can do that in any point in time. And so Juneteenth is one of the holidays that, in my opinion, is sacred enough to have to feel like we need to go beyond the food and the fun and the music. That particularly right now, there should be some conversation. And that's for the most part, the impetus behind this panel is a desire to foster conversation. And I'm grateful for our panelists who are here, who have said yes at the last minute to come together and share their vantage point from the idea that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. posed 50 years ago, 49 years ago, or 59 years ago in 1967. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And there are several questions that we are going to kind of navigate around to foster this conversation. And so again, thank you. Thank each and every last one of you for taking time. We have, and I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, starting with from my right.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Matthew Willard, council member at large for the city of New Orleans.
Kimber White Dupree, radio host on WBOK and educator in the city of New Orleans.
Eugene Green, and I'm the Council District D representative and also a lifelong member of Bethany Church, where we are now.
Eva Bayham. I am a retired professor from Southern and Dillard Universities.
All right. And we are grateful. We have one more, and perhaps it's Dr. Clyde Robertson. He very well may be on his way, and he'll jump in. So listen, as I've already mentioned, the nature of this conversation. I'm going to jump in and talk with council member. Is that the right title for you, brother? Council member Matthew Willard, our former representative, to ask him a few questions. One, Juneteenth, and if you don't mind, for you, Matthew, what's the significance to you of this holiday? And I also want to do a part two of that. Not only answer what you feel is the significance of this holiday, but what would you say to those who are having a challenge right now about this holiday and the need to celebrate this holiday, particularly right now?
I think Juneteenth should celebrate, commemorate freedom, breakage from bondage, opportunity. It should represent the American dream. It should represent progress, equality, fairness, an equal playing field. This year, it feels hard to agree with that. A few years ago, President Biden declared Juneteenth to be a federal holiday, and I'll be honest with y'all, this year I thought that the current president might remove that federal holiday designation. I think it's important to recognize that before President Biden declared Juneteenth as a federal holiday, the state of Louisiana declared it a state holiday. The timing was, 2 months or so before the President Biden did it. We did it as a state. That was back when the governor was John Bell Edwards. And again, in my head, I'm wondering, is some legislator going to file a bill to remove that as a state holiday? The last decade or so has wiped out a lot of progress and gains that we had made as a society. Another thing, I passed a bill when I was in the legislature to eliminate Confederate Memorial Day and Robert E. Lee Day. And most people in this state didn't even know those were state holidays up until 2022, I believe. So when we talk about Juneteenth and we celebrate our culture, when we celebrate our family, when we celebrate legacies, we also need to be realistic and understand what we are grappling with today and the threat that we are under, because make no mistake about it, we are a threat. There's threats coming down at the federal level. There's threats coming down at the state level.
That same question, Sister Kimberly.
So what we know about Juneteenth and the notice, right? There had been the law that passed by, was it the Congress to abolish slavery? And then we had the Emancipation Proclamation to notify everybody. And in Texas, you still had people for 2 whole years who did not know all bets were off. And that literally is happening right now as it relates to information. So I am fearful that everybody is not on the same page of observing not just the holiday, but understanding the delay of information and how much it will delay your life or your progression. And as a community, it is time for us to have some conversations to bring forth healing within our community, which is going to require some people to own up to some hurts. And every time we get to that point, things get a little uncomfortable and people start backing out and they don't want to have the conversation. So Juneteenth to me represents a delay of information, but I think in 2026 right now, we have the opportunity to, with the resource that we carry computers every day, to pass along information so that other people within our community and beyond can be successful and attain the quality of life that's promised in the Constitution before they change that.
Which may happen soon, because at the end of the day, I'm just joking, they're not going to change the Constitution. But just yesterday, it was announced that President Trump is moving civil rights investigations. You saw that, right? Very quietly. It wasn't even a big story. Very honestly, we know they got rid of the Civil Rights Division, but he's putting it with a friend. So there's never going to be any investigations of civil rights abuses through the federal government. I just think that Juneteenth is just a reminder for us to recognize that we just still have a long way to go. And in some respects, we're moving in a negative direction. And some of it has to do with the lack of participation that we have in the system. I can't emphasize enough that no matter how you feel about the present governor was elected with 547,000 votes. I'm not going to make a position Democratic or Republican, but we have more Black Democrats elected. I'm registered to vote than that. We're in the 600,000s with Black Democrats alone. If there had been 80% participation, there might be a whole nother story. So I just want to use this as an opportunity to continue to emphasize that, we've made tremendous progress, but we still have a long way to go. Information is extremely important. And just like that article appeared yesterday and not a lot of folks know about it, that information needs to be shared with everybody out there. But voter registration is important and participation, and Juneteenth is a way for us to continue to recognize that though we've made tremendous accomplishments, we still have a long way to go.
So I have taught history for 27 years on university level. And so my response will definitely be with the historical background. Based on what our 3 panelists have said, it brings to mind the long, often paraphrased quote from the philosopher George Santayana, who in the late 19th century was at Harvard University. And we often change this around all kinds of ways, but what he did say was that for those who do not study history, you're condemned to repeat it. And so we've heard it in all kinds of ways, like if you don't know your past, you don't know your present, all of that to mean. But for those of us who don't study history, we're condemned to repeat it. And I think that in light of what my colleagues here are saying, I think that's pretty clear that we have not had enough political and voter information and education in its historical context to understand what's going on today and how not to avoid it, but how to address it. So in preparation for today, I went back to read Howard Thurman. Howard Thurman is the dean of, if you will, liberation theology, and I to find out to review what would he say about this, and as well to look at what has happened. So I just want to say to you that there are or were many emancipation celebrations in the South in this country, not just Juneteenth. And one in particular, of course, you know all about the Underground Railroad. You know all about people. You may know that Frederick Douglass's wife was at the core and the reason why he was able to escape. So we have all those kinds of emancipation stories and events and celebrations. But one of the ones that I wanted to bring to your attention was called the Emancipation Jubilee. That's what it was called here in New Orleans a year before the war ended. On June 11th, 1864, there was a huge celebration, and by all accounts, from a rare book over at the Historic New Orleans Collection, where they're recounting this and listing all of what happened, there were thousands of people, and this was by Black people here in New Orleans. Thousands showed up. They went through the first, second, third, and fourth districts of the city. They paraded from what is Congo Square all the way uptown to St. Charles and back and the like. And this was because in Louisiana, the state passed, through its constitution, ended slavery. 1864. In May 1864, slavery in Louisiana was ended. You all know, and just I won't belabor you with all kind of history lessons, but you'll hear me refer to some of this as we go on. But that New Orleans, a year after the Civil War was started with the first shot at Fort Sumter in South Carolina, a year later, New Orleans fell to the Union. So in April 1862, New Orleans actually had been freed from the Confederacy. And so you had people flooding into this city, gloriously coming here saying, okay, once they were on Union soil in 1862, this was Union soil and ultimately free. So you had thousands of people coming into the city then. But before the war was over, would be over until they signed, everything was signed and sealed the next 1865. Then, of course, but 1864, there was a huge thing called Emancipation Jubilee here in New Orleans in June 1864. So New Orleanians don't necessarily have to just say about Juneteenth in Galveston, Texas. As well, there were other celebrations around the South as the Union came in and took over Confederate territory. So I think that framing it in this way helps us to understand what our power is. And that Emancipation Jubilee in 1864 was by, quote unquote, the colored population of New Orleans. Thousands showed up, but also the then governor, who was governor during the military occupation from 1864 to 1865, a governor named Michael Hahn, was on stage. And if you read this document, it tells you, well, when you read it, it tells you that the people, the Black people here, set up a platform in Congo Square. so that it says like an amphitheater, so that the throngs of people could sit and listen. And there was an oration, the orator for the day. And then there were others to come in military processions and so on and so forth. All the public schools, particularly the quote unquote colored public schools, turned out. Almost every benevolent association turned out. And all of these people came that day, the governor, and then the General Banks was there. The mayor of New Orleans was there. I think his last name was Hoyt, Hoyt, was there. Thousands that's documented, showed up, paraded through the city. So here in New Orleans, you had Emancipation Jubilee, 1864. Make sure you write that down. Remember that. But let me tell you that what Juneteenth signifies, that happened 2 months after the end of the war. And as my colleague here said, after the emancipation, but I think that we need to go back, not as far as the Emancipation Proclamation, because the Emancipation Proclamation under Lincoln freed the slaves in the rebellious states. That meant that if you weren't rebelling against the Union and you were in the South, you could keep your slaves. That's exactly what happened. The night before in 1861, December 31st, I'm sure you all know about this. It's called Watch Night. And that was an act of both resistance and emancipation, even though people weren't. But this was in South Carolina, where people sat up all night waiting until January 1st, when the Emancipation Proclamation would go in effect. If you had watch nights, it has changed through all these last few hundred years, but its original intent was to Black people, enslaved people, set up to wait for midnight in 1201 for the Emancipation Proclamation to be in effect. They prayed and they sang and they worshiped that night. But then Juneteenth would happen in 1865. That would mean that it was the last of, this is what's important about it. It was the last of the enslaved people to be told they were free. It was the last of them. So although all these emancipations happened and they were free in other places, this effectively said to people who didn't know that they were free. My friend and person I've done some other work with, Mr. Leon Waters, likes to remind us that we should not just say somebody else, like General Granger did this by himself. Black people were involved in that as well. So that's my history lesson.
Thank you for that. I'm glad you mentioned Thurman for a number of reasons. It leads me to the next question. I'm going to toss it to Councilman Willard, because he has to leave. He has another engagement, and he took his time to make sure he was here with us. So I really appreciate that. But in the vein of not only mentioning Thurman being kind of the spiritual leader, godfather of the movement, he placed a significant amount of emphasis on what we do on the inside, and what happens on the inside of us shows up out on the outside. He was a mystic, but played a significant part in that movement, and his role in the movement was to get us to shape our hearts, so that from our hearts proceeds our right action. And so in this conversation about Juneteenth, I want to ask Mr. Willard, how do we allow Juneteenth, from your vantage point, how do we allow Juneteenth to move beyond a symbolic day, an event, an occasion, to become internalized within us, so that it shows up in our actions every day as we are residents of this city?
When you were talking about the delay in the communication, that was something that I was thinking about too, as I was reviewing information to get ready for this panel. And I think that was very important, because in a lot of respects, society today, with the emergence of technology and the ability to access a supercomputer in your pocket, the ability to pull down troves of information from a variety of sources, sometimes correct information, sometimes false information, it seems like as a society, we've moved away from taking action. And I was speaking at something last week, and I said, we have yet to see a state of Louisiana where minority and Black voters decided to really show up. And what would it look like if next year, because everybody needs to know this, next year is the statewide election cycle. So next year we will be voting on a new governor and a new attorney general and new members of the legislature and insurance commissioner and all these positions. What would our state look like if we showed up and voted at 100% participation level? We can't even dream that right now. We can't even dream that right now. And so the delay in communication to me tied to Juneteenth, where people who were already free found out 2 years later that they were actually free, is symbolic of what we're going through today. Because a lot of people, if you give them the time and the platform, will tell you about the struggles that they deal with on a regular basis. And those are valid issues. And they're typically not the only person dealing with those struggles. But then at the same time, when we say, well, what happened when we had the chance to vote for governor and we decided to stay home or go to the Saints game or go to homecoming, and we got what we got, and we're suffering with those impacts. And so for me, I've been trying to do this type of work for 6 years. It's not enough to just say, today is the last day of early voting, and voter turnout is terrible. And in all honesty, the choices on the ballot for voters in the city of New Orleans, at least this part of the city of New Orleans, aren't hugely consequential. We have a Democratic and Republican Senate primary. That's what we have. At the end of the day, whoever wins that, go head to head later this fall, right? But why is it so difficult for us to say, well, there is an election, and regardless of what's on the ballot, I'm going to vote? Because our ancestors used to dream of having the ability to just go vote and not have to show that they were educated or that they own land or all these things. So we squander away some of the benefits that we received due to the hard work, the blood, sweat, and tears of some of our ancestors, and we take it for granted. And I think that's symbolic of kind of society today. We expect things to be sort of easy, but right now, things are not easy, and things are getting kind of scary. And, we were talking about how it feels when you're on the outside looking in. Well, I've been on the inside, and I might write a book one day to tell y'all about some of the stories and experiences that I've had, because sometimes they're unbelievable. But even with that experience and that inside knowledge, some of the things that are happening today really scare me. They really scare me. Not just on the local level, but on the national level and on an international level. And I think if we want to see change, if we want to see greater progress, we have to be part of that solution. And it's not good for us. It's not good enough for us to just say, well, I voted. What else can I do? Because back when the slaves were found out on Juneteenth that they were free, they got together and they said, okay, now how do we advance? What do we do with this freedom? How do we become landowners and create job opportunities for our families and friends? We need that same type of energy. We need that same type of collaboration today. And what we have to have is an end to all of us looking out for our own personal interests. Because when you talk about politics, that is sort of one of the things that I believe continues holding us back. Everybody looks out for their own personal interests. And I'll wrap up with this. in politics, at least from what I've seen, we're content on having there's this beautiful pie. We're content with having this one nice slice of the pie. And we never got together to say, how can we make our own pie?
Thank you. So many different things have to go into this conversation on how we get together, right? We have to deal with the isms and the things and the anti-Blackness in our own community. And I need everybody to wake up a little bit. Oh, it's off? Is this better? Oh, okay. All right. So we have to do some acknowledging of wrongs that we've done each other in the community and that are all based on colonialism. We got to get rid of the anti-Blackness within our Black community. And what I mean by this, especially in New Orleans, especially in Southeast Louisiana, colorism, elitism, the magical Negro. We really got to stop letting people do that to us. But we also have to get rid of the misogyny, the misogynoir, the sexism, and then finally, we got to get rid of homophobia in our community. Yes, and ageism. I'm sorry. I did say that back there, but I didn't say it here. Thank you for bringing it back up. But on two fronts with regards to the ageism, because that's a big crux of why we can't communicate. We talk at young people. We don't talk to them. You talk to them. We talk to them as if we are the wealth of knowledge and they know nothing. And on the flip side, they look at y'all and they look at the older people. They look at me sometimes and say that my ideas are outdated. And we won't get beyond that to have the conversation. And that is a big problem. We have a problem with intergenerational communication. Yes, elders deserve respect because you've been here a long time, but that does not mean you don't give respect to young people. And that happens a lot. It happens too much. There is a wealth of knowledge that young people have. When it comes to technology, they can teach you how to wire your whole house through a phone, right? Facebook, Instagram, marketing. These kids are making big money. What they're missing is historical context on why this hustle exists. In addition to that, keeping the dollar, the Black dollar in the Black community is our biggest problem. We want to buy Gucci. We want to buy this. We want to do that. We have Black designers. We have people in our community that provide great service who we skip over to go give to other communities. And I'm not saying don't spend your money with them, but I am saying spend money with us first. Texturism and featureism, and I'm gonna pass the mic. The paper bag test, we still doing that here. We've never had a dark-skinned mayor, ever. We've had them run, we've never elected them. That's a community problem. Good hair, we still have people saying that. If you are bald, your hair is not good, it is run away from your head. We have to anti-Blackness our community so that we can unify, plus make apologies to each other from where we have caused each other harm. Then we can move forward. Because in most relationships, especially in marriages and friendships, once somebody has said to you, what you're doing is hurting me, and you acknowledge it and say you're sorry, we can go forward. But there's plenty of us in our community that go, well, it wasn't me. You're doing it right now. Don't tell people that what they're feeling didn't happen. Because once you do that, they'll stop listening to you.
Thank you very much. That was tough to follow. Look, before Councilmember Willard goes, if he has to go, I want to emphasize to him something that he talked about and I've talked about during that last election, and then I'm gonna go into where we go from here. During the last election, and you and I are members of the Orleans Parish Democratic Executive Committee, the chair sent out a message saying, good news, turnout was 30%. Now, I'm not using her name, but what I'm saying is that it was because it was expected to be 17%, but still 30% turnout. And we're not going to have 30% turnout in this upcoming election. The people are bored at the early voting places. I voted because I usually always vote on the first day, but I went later on the first day. And there were like 20 people who had voted on that day. So I'm just saying it's such an important right, a precious right that so many people fought for, that I just want to emphasize to all of us that we have to continue to impress upon folks that our history is based on a lot of sacrifices of a lot of other people. A lot of folks sacrificed so that we could vote. We just got to do everything that we can to continue voting. Nick, you want to say something about the voting?
We, brother Nick, your question is extremely important. If you don't mind, hold on to it, and I'm going to invite everybody else. Yeah, no problem, no problem.
Forget.
Yeah. You are, because we are going to have a point where you can have your questions, because this is indeed a conversation. I want to be able to allow the persons who are on the panel to share what they have, and then every question that you have, as best as possible, we want to make sure we honor you because your questions are extremely important. We good with that?
Yes. I'm going to remember what you were asking. Nick said he might forget what he was asking.
I'll remember. I'll ask it for you, brother.
About the particular
Yeah,
precincts,
yeah.
but we know the precincts. Very honestly, we know the precincts, but that's a whole, where the voting is, the turnout is higher than in others. But I'm going to certainly defer and wait till the questions session, because if we talk about where we could go from here, there's so much that we could talk about. It would take a long time to talk about it. I know that you all may be here because you have specific questions. But one thing I think that we can do where we go from here is to recognize that we have made progress. Things are a lot better now than they were 50 years ago in our community. We certainly still have a lot more to do. And that's going to require us to be open with each other and having more discussions and being blunt about certain things. 30% voter turnout is just terrible. I don't care what the reason is. You went to Southern's homecoming game versus Jackson. There's 10,000 votes there. That's terrible. That's just, we have to be straightforward about it. Crime, the crime that takes place in our community that afflicts certain communities more than anything else, that's just terrible and it's unacceptable. At the end of the day, and sometimes the way folks treat each other, I have a problem in my district, for example, that folks on one side of Florida Avenue don't talk to the folks on the other side because of the history of what happened 40 years ago. Can we get past some of that in terms of moving forward and recognizing that our future can only be better if we work a little bit more together? But I'm going to wait and answer any of the questions that you have. But Pastor, in terms of where we go from here, the subject of our discussion is to recognize that we've made a lot of progress, but we have a lot to be done. Juneteenth is an interesting holiday, if you will, because when the persons in Texas were notified that freedom had existed for a while before they found out about it, some of the discussion was, well, what do we do now? We're living on their plantations. Some of them refuse to allow people to come down for the celebration. So just recognize that, just as my theme is that we've accomplished a lot, and folks found out about the Juneteenth, but they also had to reckon with things that we can't even imagine today. Now what? Where do we go from there? We just have a lot still to do.
I'll wait for your, I'm not quite sure.
Sure. And it really, the question for me really, and thank you all for your responses, because each of you have a unique vantage point. The question piggybacks somewhat of what you mentioned, and that is Howard Thurman's position that what we do moving forward starts internally, starts from our hearts, from within. The shaping of the civil rights movement, again, was to not allow what was going on around to develop within. That was the thread and the force behind, soul force behind that movement. And the question for me now that we are experiencing Juneteenth, it's a holiday that happens once a year. It might be under the chopping block, it might not. The question is this event symbolic? Is it real? And if so, how do we use what's inside of us to allow the spirit of Juneteenth to be lived out every day in our lives? Yes, ma'am.
So Howard Thurman certainly talked about, this is Thurman, you may not know him. And you need to know this, that Martin Luther King carried this book with him almost everywhere he went. And what Thurman talked about in this Jesus and the Disinherited is that Jesus was a Jew, a poor Jew in a Roman occupied territory. So when I would tell my students that to understand Christianity, you should understand the Roman Empire because they were fighting against the Roman Empire. And I won't go to give you a whole lecture on that, but what Thurman is saying, and he details in this text and others, is that we must understand that Jesus was preaching and moving around under an occupier who was not, who did not care about the Jewish people who were there. And that here we have Jesus, he's speaking to people primarily to anybody, but anybody under occupied forces. But here in Black America, to talk about identifying with this man who was under Roman occupation. And so I'm an eternal optimist, but I don't neglect what is the realism that's happening around me to understand what we must and should do. And one of the things that I think all of you have spoken to, the issue you've spoken to is about this whole notion of where do we go, what do we do, what should we recognize. I think you did a wonderful a listing, both of you, of all of the things that are confronting us. And what we could do is to understand how that affects us, but also what has been done. What has been done? And we have a long history of what has been done. When Barack Obama ran for president, we had huge voter turnout everywhere. Prior to that, people were saying, well, we don't have anything or anyone to vote for. And people condemned particularly Black people about not turning out to vote. Sometimes rightly so, as you're saying, with this low voter turnout. But are we giving enough as politicians? I hate to call you politician if you're speaking. Are we giving enough, those of us who are professors in the classroom, those of us who have voice to the people, if you will, are we telling them enough to get them out there so that they can understand that it is, they can get rid of apathy and understand what is at stake? Black people turned out to vote in throngs for a long, long time until I'm sure that it looked like they could not. So where do we go from here is what King and others have addressed through time, is that one, we have to understand how those of us who have a voice to get to the people, to explain it to them, to share it with them, to have forums like this, to make sure that people understand what I should say, how they can be empowered to act. They have to have that something to vote for. Otherwise, they're thinking that, oh, gee, it's no use. I think one of you said earlier on the population of Democrats, for example. Population, I think, is it a third of Black voters in this state that could turn things around? Isn't 30-some% in this state that could turn things around? Well, where are they? When we had the gubernatorial election, my understanding just from reading, Southern had a homecoming. I think Grambling had a homecoming on the big election day, right? We had so many other things going on that day and not enough push to get people out there to early vote.
We can't stay there. We can't stay there in terms of what people were doing that day. And I'm saying that because I'm saying that because we have early voting. So we can't really blame it on that particular day. You have almost 2 weeks to be able to cast your vote early. It's just apathy. It is apathy about voting in general.
No, I'm agreeing with you on that. I'm just saying that if we know that, was the push really there across the state to get people out to early vote. And I'm not putting that burden on those of you who are politicians. That burden should be on all of us. But we still have to be cognizant of what needs to happen and where we need to go. I'm going to go back to what I know best. And that is, and it doesn't mean you have to sit in a classroom. It means that we need to educate each other on what we need to do. And just as you're saying here, we need to educate people on, I know there's all this early voting, but there's also something else. The state is larger than the city.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people all out in the hinterlands who aren't getting the message.
We used to use our churches for that, and we need to go back to doing that. In other communities, there's churches with, or like practices where they go in to learn about their culture there. In the Jewish faith, they go to school on Saturday. In the Muslim faith, they go to school. They teach this to our kids. We used to do this here, and somewhere along the way, we got uncomfortable and we stopped. But we have the communities to do it. And once we get them inside the building, I mean, not lock the doors, but lock the doors so that we can give you the information so that in the very least you're equipped with it to make good decisions.
Well, how about the church outdoors? Take the church from within the walls. And I think there are a number of churches who do that. I'm originally from rural Southwest Louisiana. So I'm accustomed to seeing, and I've been living in this area since the 70s, with the exception of leaving for some years. But I go back home all the time. And there is another world out there that this area does not know about. And when we are out in Southwest Louisiana, we go to North Louisiana, Central Louisiana. There's a totally different story going on there. And there are voters there and people who want to do what is necessary, but they don't have access to what you have in the city and to what we have here. And there are little churches, just like during the civil rights movement, there are little churches who are out in the midst of places where they could be burned down. There are, so they are in those little churches talking about it, hushed still, because they don't have the protection you have of a large concentrated Black community here. And so they have to live with some fear who they're talking to. They don't, also another thing is they don't have your resources that you have here. You have opportunities here to work and to earn money and to live it like they don't have in those rural communities. They just don't have them. So the whole thing is that, yes, I'm asking you in the city to think beyond just the city, because we have some other things that cause. So every Black person, eligible voter in this city can get out and vote. But what about everybody who lives outside of here? And earlier I walked in on a conversation. I just want to expose who unless you want to talk. But it was talking about, being able to get the word out in general.
Yeah.
And the like. How do we do that in these rural areas? You have Black representation here. They don't have that in those rural areas. They just don't. And those people there are wondering, what can they do? They could be under attack. And the majority of your voters aren't here. They're out there.
Yeah. Thank you all for that piece. I heard several themes in terms of how we're able to live this out, moving forward from here. I heard technology, bridging the generational gap. I also hear bridging a cultural gap. Even in the midst of this conversation, I almost felt like Abby Phillips. I was going to have to jump in for a second. Dr. Eva, you made one other point, and I'm going to spring off of your point again. This is going to be my last question, so that we can get to some of your questions. In an effort to steer this conversation towards solutions, you mentioned we have resources here in the city. Can we go down the line and what do we have? The question the question in the Bible. I'm a pastor. I got to go to the Bible, and God asked, "What's in your hand?" And I think that's definitely where we're stuck, because we can spend an inordinate amount of time raising the issue. But I think in order for us to get to a solution, let's just start identifying what we do well or what we do have, so that we can move forward. So again, in that same vein, what do we have from the standpoint of our council member, from the standpoint of our community grassroots, from the standpoint of our councilmen, and from the standpoint of a long-time educator? I'm going to start with Brother Matthew. What do we have in our possession, and what can we right now rally around locally so we can make some quick wins? That makes sense?
Well, when you say what do we have in our possession in terms of what?
Resources. What do we have that works to our advantage? What good qualities do we have that we possess in our community and our city that we can build upon so that we can push this progress forward?
I mean, I think collectively, the easiest thing for us all to rally around is that we all have one vote. And the more people we can get together expands and multiplies that vote. We have the power to dictate elections in the state of Louisiana. We just choose not to utilize it. And I keep going back to elections and elected officials because that dictates the type of change that we will or will not see. The city of New Orleans can elect the best city council members. It could elect the best mayor. It could elect the strongest, most intelligent state representatives and state senators in the city's history ever. But politics is politics. And a lot of the change that we need to see happen as a community comes down to politics. And if the makeup in the state legislature does not change, then we will always be back in this same position. Because it doesn't matter how strong an individual member is, or how intelligent, or how likable a person is representing the city of New Orleans. If that strongest, most intelligent person brought forward a bill to increase the minimum wage in Louisiana to $15 an hour, it's political. And they won't have enough votes because it's political. So we have to branch outside of the city of New Orleans, like the professor was just talking about. And we have yet to see that type of activity, that type of collaboration, that type of collective support in the state of Louisiana. That's one thing that we have not utilized. And I think the opportunity is there. A lot of people are frustrated. A lot of people want to see change. Next year is going to be a consequential year for the state of Louisiana. Because like I said, you're electing a new state legislature, you're electing a new governor, you're electing a new attorney general. Mind you, all three of those entities attacked the city of New Orleans this year. They attacked us to the point where even when we want to do something that's in the best interest of the city, such as borrow future property tax, borrow against future property tax collections to help us get out of this budget crisis, we have to get political approval just for us to do that. Which means that every move that we make or don't make, they use against us. So I'm at the point right now where I'm sick and tired of trying to play nice. And I'm sick and tired of people coming up with excuses. If you're not voting because you don't like what candidates are hearing or telling you, then show up to a forum and tell us what you want to hear. Call my office and say, you need to do this. There's a give and take. There's a give and take. Everybody has responsibility and everybody has power. And that's something that I don't think we've fully taken advantage of. And we're suffering because of that.
What do we have? we black, we rich, and we got buku power. That is a phrase that if you haven't seen it printed really big, it's really true. If you black, you rich, and you got buku power, power of prayer, the power of communication. Problem is, we have all this power and we don't use it. Okay, we have opportunities starting now, and we've had those opportunities to share information. We were just talking in the back. I think it was Nick and Gary. Medicaid, people are getting ready to have to apply for Medicaid every 6 months. Every 6 months. And in order to apply, you're going to have to do 80 hours of community service to be eligible to apply, reapply for Medicaid. Some people aren't able to do volunteer work because everybody is not able-bodied. But we have to start sharing this information so that I know every year on our show we have people to come over to talk about the insurance for our seniors. And then not just give them the information, go to them and help them, because while technology is secondhand for a lot of us, the kids, for sure, they can't live without it. If the smart board goes down, they don't know what to do. But we need the ways of our seniors and our young people to be put together so that our effects and steps can be ordered and everybody can go in the same direction. But first, like I said before, we have some healing that we have to do with each other. We got some apologizing that we have to do to each other for the things that we have done to each other. And then when we've watched people do to each other and said nothing, we have to stop being cowards, because the people who mean us harm are definitely bold about it.
I am going to just for 1 minute emphasize what Councilmember Willard referred to, but I'm going to go back to what I referred to earlier and tell you the question that Pastor asked about what do we have in terms of resources is that we have numbers. At the end of the day, 31%, and this is about Juneteenth, so it's okay for me to focus on African American in this particular setting. We have 31% of all of the registered voters in the state of Louisiana, they're African American. We have over 660,000 registered African American voters, not to mention the fact that maybe most of us are Democrats, but we actually have a combination of more Democratic voters and independent voters than there are Republican voters. Yet Republicans hold every seat on a state level. The governor, lieutenant governor, the attorney general, the insurance commissioner, I'm missing a couple of them, but plus 2/3 in the House, 2/3 in the Senate. The Supreme Court has 4 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and an independent. At the end of the day, the funny thing is that we have all the kind of numbers that could change that if we wanted. Again, I know that we could discuss it for a while, but I am a politician. I was elected, and the turnout was relatively abysmal compared to when we voted for President Obama. And we all know how we stood in line to vote against David Duke, right? Oh my gosh, people were standing in line. They were out there before the polls opened. What is more difficult to see right now is that some of the issues that are affecting us right now, such as the state taking away 3 judges in the criminal district court, 2 juvenile court judges, the clerk of court's position, and other things that they've done, or maybe as important issues as they were back then when David Duke was running for office. But the turnout right now, when we celebrate 30% turnout, just reminds you that we have a lot to do. But I am a little bit, with due respect, I'm a little bit less tolerant, though. I don't care if you're in a rural area. I don't care if you're in an area where it rains a lot. I don't care if you're in an area where you don't have bus transportation. There are too many options for you to vote these days. Early voting is 2 weeks, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. at 4 locations in New Orleans, and then you can go to other parishes, such as all of the parishes around us. You can vote by mail. You can request a ballot. A lot of people fought for the ability to vote by mail. I remember when I was young, my parents would always go to vote on Parker Street around the corner, and I would go in with them. We lived on Lafayette Street at that time. I remember that if you were going to be out of town, you had to actually offer an excuse to be out of town, and they could accept it or not. That was another way that they were able to control voting. You could only vote then on that day. And if you were out of town, you might not be allowed the right to vote because someone had the chance to make an arbitrary decision as to whether or not your vote was good enough. Or if your excuse was good enough. So we have a lot to discuss, but I just want to say that we have tremendous resources in our state and in our city to be able to make some of the changes that we need to see made. And everybody needs to be encouraged to vote, just like jury duty. Everybody needs to be encouraged to participate in jury duty. I know that's a little bit of a challenge, but we're going to be discussing that more. The jury duty is a little bit different, but not tremendously. Do you know that I know people who don't register to vote because they don't want to be called for jury duty? So you mean all of your life, from the age of 18 to 78, you're not going to be able to participate in voting on who runs for president, who runs for governor, who runs for mayor, because they might call you to be on a jury? And that's the kind of things that we still see happening in our community. Go
If
ahead.
you did not like the Carmelo Anthony verdict, that is because he had an all-white jury. So yes, it matters. It matters heavily.
Jury service matters, voting matters, registering to vote matters. And I think that some of the discussion that I've had is in line with my personality. I think that we just need to be blunt about it. I went to an event where Jesse Jackson came to a local university and he spoke at the local university. And he made a speech and he talked about the importance of voting. And he said, well, at the end of this speech, we're going to register those students who aren't registered to vote here. And I said, okay, that's going to be fine. 5 or 6 students are going to register. They're going to come up there to register to vote. I was stunned. It was a university. About 200 people went down there and said, we weren't registered to vote. And you can vote very close to the locations where your universities are. If you're at Dillard, for example, you vote at the library, which is right there. And now you actually vote on the campus because the library is closed. There's no excuse. And we have to recognize, and I guess it's up to us too, to tell people how important it is. But some things you see the judges being taken. Some things you see the state is not maintaining its own thoroughfares. You see that they're taking money from the Superdome, the convention center, the arena, and also everything along navigable waterways, and they're just using it for their own purposes. But we do have to recognize that the vote is important. Where do we go from here? And also what resources we have? We have numbers, and we have to use those numbers.
And quickly, I told a fib. I told you that was my last question. It's not. Sorry, Lord. This is the same vein, and Doc, I will come back to you. In the vein of what you just mentioned, sometimes we know the concept of or the conceptual implications of certain decisions that have been made, but not how it affects our everyday life, like you mentioned. Redistricting just happened. We don't need. I think we know the direct implications of the gutting of the Voter Rights Act, but things like redistricting. Can one of you three kind of talk to us in the congregation about how that impacts everyday life? The lines being redrawn, because again, for some it could be a concept, but for the everyday citizen, between the three of you talk about how this really is going to impact us on our everyday life moving forward? Yeah.
Well, because you left off with me, and then I'm only going to take a second to say it, Pastor. We know what it does. At the end of the day, we're going to have a smaller number of members of the Black Caucus on a national level. We are going to be in less of a position to affect votes in Congress that impact us. When the President of the United States says that he's going to take civil rights out of the Civil Rights Division and he's going to put it into some division that he just makes up, all those things are there because at the end of the day, we don't have the clout and the ability to push back. It just gives you a chance to push back. And it is very complex. If you're living in the 9th Ward right now and you have a blighted home next to you and you have waters that come up to your doorway because you don't have any ditches and it's been 75 years that same way, you may not be thinking about the implications of having fewer Black congresspeople, but we do need to think about it. It's not going to affect your everyday life, but at the end of the day, big decisions are made on a federal level that impact us. Now, we can feel some of it because I know folks feel the gas price right now. That is an example of the person who is elected right now thinking that he has all of the power in the world and that he can do whatever he wants and that nobody's going to really care. So each of us, as we go to the pump, has got to recognize that it's not just that Trump was elected, but it's just that it's also that he doesn't have a Congress to push back on him. He can do what he wants. He can declare a war and say it's not a war, and then there's nobody on congressional level or even on a federal judge's level to be able to check him in terms of just the balance of powers. And that is hard to talk about. It is. I'll be honest with you and tell you that that's one of the challenges that exist on a federal level. You don't think sometimes that you can do anything about it, but so many things are done that really do impact you. And that's all. I mean, that's the main thing is that we have to be as cognizant of the importance of our vote on a local level as on a national level, and recognize that if there were no implications for your voting and for having the number of Black representatives that you had, then nobody would be trying to attack it. The reason that they're trying to take away the right to vote and forcing you to have to do certain things is that it does make a difference. I just hope especially people who don't vote can recognize that.
With regard to redistricting, if you are familiar with cooking, you know that the more water you add to something, it dilutes it. That's basically what the redistricting is doing. It is adding more water, meaning spreading or lowering the impact of the amount of people who are able to vote and have someone to represent people that look like us. And the unfortunate reality is part of our biggest problem is how we message people. You're not shaming people into vote. You're shaming people into stay at home. Yes, we do know that there were a lot of strides made for us to have access to the vote, but arguing and like fussing at, like, berating people because they don't vote does not motivate them to go vote. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna just stay home. And that's exactly what people did in the last presidential election, because he didn't win by popular vote with regard to the population of the United States. He won because people who were dissatisfied and jaded stayed home and did nothing. Same thing with the current governor. I have so many words about this man that I cannot say in this church, but all the panels, and you say, go to a panel, talk to somebody. He didn't even go to the panels, and we didn't show up to vote against him. So we really, like I said, we Black, we rich, we have richness. Everybody wants to be a part of what it is that we do, not just here in the United States, globally. If you go anywhere in the world, where's the flavor, where's the rhythm, where's the excitement, where's the joy? It's with us. But we have to heal us so that we continue to move us.
So as I've said earlier, I have taught college students for 27 years. And when I was at Southern Baton Rouge for 20 of those years, every election cycle, the local people would come and want to register the students to vote. Southern University at the time, had a large population of foreign students, a large population of students who are not from Louisiana. And they were ushered, many people were shamed, students were shamed into vote, trying to vote locally, telling them, Black people don't vote and all of this stuff. But one of the questions students asked, but who weren't from here, well, what happens if I register here and not vote in my local election? What happens to my community? And there was nobody there telling them that they could absentee vote in their hometowns, not just out of state, but in state. So education was not taking place in terms of voter education, and some of the things that you just mentioned, both of you just talked about, was not discussed, but we'd have this great big push every time there's a big election to register students at Southern Baton Rouge or Adela so they can vote here. And then there was criticism of those students who had no interest outside of a big, citywide or national election, because they had no investment here other than that they came to school here. And so what I'm leading to is that we have to do more in terms of informing and educating our population. That is grossly neglected. On that level, there's also something else. my first degree is in journalism, and I still consider myself a student of journalism. And so I'm watching all the time. I'm reading everything, and I'm watching closely how people communicate information. What the Republican Party learned from the Democrats who had perfected this almost during the civil rights movement was how to get the message out. And they are constantly, it doesn't matter which party you're for, they are constantly beating a message into people all the time. Democrats and independents don't do that. When we say we want to take the high ground, or no, maybe we shouldn't, maybe we should go the other direction, I don't think that there's an either or. You don't have to lose your values and your ethics and your morals to combat somebody else, to bring the truth out, to tell them what needs to be told. And many times, people, the masses out here, are not getting a message but from one side. And if they don't have town hall meetings regularly with our, elected officials, I'm sure you do, Mr. Green and Mr. Willard, but if people aren't getting those town halls regularly, if your people who support you aren't beating those bushes and going knocking on doors regularly, if you're not on radio shows and TV shows trying to get the message out, we can't blame the masses for not knowing. The message in the last gubernatorial election that I heard and kept studying was that we had a winner already. There was no or little attention paid to what seemed to be a strategy. Put in a lot of same party people running for governor, diluted, so that one candidate could come out. Now, I think you two may have these better statistics than I do, but it seems like the present governor, like him or not, was elected with less than a third of the electorate. And it wasn't just because people didn't turn out. It was because people were told over and over that the election was won. It was already in the bag. So when the president occupant of the White House won the first time, I think he's a former CIA director, said on a television show that we had the greatest example of psychological warfare on American people that had ever happened in this country. That all across our media, as a former journalism degree recipient, I don't bash the media, but I do study it to understand it. All across the media was constant coverage of the antics of Mr. Trump. There was the Vice President Harris had been under President Biden, sent almost across this world, conferring with foreign governments, doing all kinds of things. None of that was followed. Why? Because as the head of CBS News said at the time, Mr. Trump was good for ratings and therefore money. Your ratings of your TV station or radio station depends on how much you can charge the advertisers. And so he said it was good for ratings. Didn't follow the representative of the U.S. government going to speak with other foreign governments about matters that affected all of us. That wasn't of interest. What was of interest were the antics. And since he was in the news all the time and had the most press, then of course what happened was that then of course people went out and then they said, oh, this other candidate didn't do anything all this time. But they didn't get their message out. I'm not blaming Mr. Trump for that. I'm saying that the person, the other party, the Democratic Party, the other people running, they should have been getting their message out all the time. And then one last note on messaging is that when students at Dillard, students at Southern that I taught would come in and ask the same question. And that is, they're asking, well, we just don't want to learn about slavery. We want to know what else is that, where do we go from here? That King asked. What else? What's my role? What do I do? And one of the things they're constantly told, and many of the students at HBCUs come from churches or come from homes where religion was important. And they talk about how in their churches and the like, they're told to be quiet and don't bring new stuff from the university. Don't bring that stuff here. And so they're not being heard. And then when we want to talk about that, they're not turning out, they're not doing this, and they're not doing that, we've effectively squashed all their interests and their intellect in telling them what they should do or could do as good citizens. So we have a communications. All of what I've said is communication is important. Getting the message out is critically important. How we get that message out is critically important, and to whom is critically important. If we don't do all those things and continue to do those things, then we can, but we should not denounce those who aren't doing. I mean, they should be doing their civic duty anyway. And last note on this is that, so I'm a child of the 60s. I came of age in the 60s. And I knew in my little town in Southwest Louisiana, there was people, farming community. So people rose real early in the morning and they went to work real early because they did farming and domestic work. So they would come by our house where we live. Some people would get picked up by the people who were going to work. And so there was almost anybody's house you can go to at the crack of dawn. They had coffee. So there were people would stop by the house to have coffee while they were waiting to go to work. And they would talk politics. You wouldn't think they were. You would think, oh, they're just country people. But they would talk politics. And one of the refrains they said, which makes some of what you all are saying today, most of it anyway, which drives this home about not voting. They would say, we have to go vote for the lesser of two evils, because they had no power, they had to vote for one person or the other. Didn't look like them. But they would all say at election time, we're going to vote. There's no excuse. You choose one, whether you think they're for you or not. Choose one and show up and vote. Stuck with me, my husband and I would go to vote, take the children from babies into the voting booth with us. And it had a great impact because our children have children now, and they don't go vote without taking those children in the voting booth with them. Every time you go vote for a millage, you go vote for whatever in the fire truck, whatever. You vote. That was our message to them, and that was the message that I received growing up. And so we have to inculcate that into everybody. We're preaching to the choir today, but carry that message if you can to the next generations.
Our messaging matters. All right. Listen, I want, if you don't mind, giving the panelists a hand for taking out time. I want to create an opportunity for those who may have a few questions. If our panelists will hang around just a little while longer.
I'm going to have to leave because
Okay.
I have a musician I need to get to his
Okay.
next place.
All right. Thank you so much.
Let him ask you a question.
Yes, please. If you have a question, please, by all means.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, stand if you don't mind.
From Jamie Johnson, and he's the
Davis?
Jamie Johnson is the governor nominee for the Democratic party for South Carolina. And the Instagram actually, it started out, it showed him getting out of his vehicle, and it said, boots on the ground. I think that's the biggest message we can get out. I know my fraternity, we're working on an initiative to get boots on the ground. So boots on the ground to me is what we have to do. I know we have to figure out how to do that, but boots on the ground is the message from me.
Boots on the ground is a good message. And honestly, as Democrats, our messaging is too long. What MAGA has beat us on is that short, concise messaging. We give too many words. And if people start going to sleep, we really have to, hey, this is bad because ... move on. But all the extra explain, less is more if you want people to get your message.
Barack Obama said, yes, we can.
And hope. Yes, we can and hope. Short. Move forward.
Now the platform has many, too many words.
Okay.
Close.
One of the things that I think is very important, and it applies to redistricting, it applies to voting, it applies to children on campus, students on campus, whatever. Because I was a census enumerator for the 1970, the 1990, and the 2000 census. It is important for people to complete the census. The census has to be completed. And I even did Dillard University in 2000. And the president at that time was being counted in Georgia rather than Louisiana. And it was important. The students at Dillard University and Xavier and SUNO, they needed to register. And in the census, they were going to be here for at least 4 years to get the degree. They needed to register in Louisiana rather than in their home country. Because this is where it comes down to votes, where you live.
All right, yeah. Brother Nick, wait for his answer. I just think that we need to meet people where we at. If we don't meet them where they're at, then everything goes unheard. So we have to bridge the gap, bridge the communities, take the old with the new, take the history, take the wisdom, and put it out through social media, through everywhere. Because again, where they're at, the churches, everything is now on social media. So we have to meet the people where we at and give them the voice and let them hear it, how they understand.
Councilman, I'm going to go back to and you all go back to the question I had before, find out about. Now, taken by precinct, and I'm going back some days before and working and helping to get the vote out. Have you all? I know you probably have, but have you identified those precincts in those neighborhoods with the lowest voting turnout? Now. And I don't know how it was done and how it should be done again, but back in the day, and when I was doing campaigning, of course, we were spread it out among the city of New Orleans. But we actually knew who had not voted, okay? And would go to these different locations and make sure we had people to knock on the doors for them to say, look, you have not voted, we need you to go out and vote. So addressing, and I don't know how the city is doing it. I don't know how people that's running for political office is doing it. I guess the city don't really have anything to do with it. Actually, it's those elected officials, people that's going out to vote. How are they taking that information on the precincts and looking at the turnout at a particular time during the day and having volunteers to go into those neighborhoods and canvass again to get the people out to vote? Okay, I just want to know, is there a strategy for doing that?
I'm going to tell you, Nick, I feel that I'm amongst friends when I say something like this. I can tell you exactly the areas in which the turnout is going to be highest. But in this room, you may not want me to say it out loud because you know where I'm going with that. the day of the voting, I still know who to call if they haven't been out. I'm going to be calling in areas where there's a likelihood that they'll come out, and that's the challenge. Look, we can tell you on the day of the election. At the end of the day, that's kind of it's an urban legend that you go into the polling place. Because, for example, in the city of New Orleans, there are 300 precincts. So you can go and look at the list, and you look at your list, and you can tell who hasn't come out to vote, and then you try to call them on the phone to tell them to go out to vote. Man, unless you have a machine that has 50 people making phone calls, it's hard for you to do something there. But I can tell you who hasn't voted by 1:00 p.m. The question is that if I get on the phone and call them, are they going to go out and vote? Because they know they haven't voted by 1:00 p.m. It's something that, it's a nice reminder, but the precincts, there are so many of them, and the population is so large that, it's just hard to say that between 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock when they close, that you're going to be able to call a whole lot of people. Now, look, I just ran for office, and I'll tell you that on election day we did it, but I only have so many people. At the end of the day, there's 33 different there are a lot of polling places in my community, and I can go to it and I can tell you who hasn't voted, but the issue is getting in contact with them by phone to say, have you gone out to vote? At the end of the day, what we were doing was we had a list, and we would simply call the people from that list who were likely to vote and ask them if they had voted. Nick, there's a reality in this room, and I feel that we're amongst friends. I can tell you that my highest voting precincts are in Gentilly and the Lakefront, and the lowest ones are in the 9th Ward and Desire. Yes. Yeah, and it's hard to get those numbers. Right. Mm-hmm. No, it's important to emphasize being active and also recognizing the positive sides of it. But it's also important to be blunt and honest. Many times, Nick, at 2 o'clock during the day, when we go to somebody's house and knock on their door or call them and they haven't voted, they know they haven't voted. They don't go out and say, you know something, I got that call I was waiting on to go out and vote. We have a problem with turnout. I'll tell you all that I speak to some people who tell you that they didn't vote and don't have a reason. I have a guy who voted against me once who said that he voted against me because my opponent looked like somebody he recognized on the Laverne and Shirley show. They just come up with all kinds of reasons to not vote. And whereas I understand that we don't want to shame anybody into voting, I can tell you at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who spend a lot of time, a lot of political capital, getting the ability to vote by mail, getting the ability to vote early, getting the ability to vote in your neighborhood, getting the ability to vote at 5 different polling locations for early voting instead of 1. I really don't accept many excuses for that, to be very honest with you. And I'll give you an anecdote as to why I don't accept that excuse. There are people in Louisiana, and I've spoken to them because I have a reason to get around to them from time to time. Boy, in New Orleans, we can vote early right now on the lakefront, or I can go to Chef, or I can go to City Hall, and all of those are within 3 miles of where we are now. I can catch a bus to go and vote. I can also have requested a ballot to vote by mail if I want to have done so. In small cities like LeBeau, Louisiana, maybe I shouldn't have mentioned a specific city, but I shouldn't have mentioned a city because I spoke to somebody there. Take LeBeau out of your mind. There are cities in our state where Black people are intimidated voting. If you have a job and you work for a particular parish, do you know that they'll tell you that the people know who you voted for? And if you didn't vote for the person who you were supposed to vote for, they know that, and that can affect your job. In some small cities, the sheriff, the mayor, and the police juror are all brothers, and they all know exactly what you do at the end of the day. There are places in rural areas where we talk about me being able to go to the lakefront and vote. For them to vote, they might have to go 10 miles to vote. And so I don't really have many excuses for people who are in the city that don't vote because of all those opportunities. I know that we need to motivate people and we need to get out there, but we also need to have a frank discussion about, especially in cities like Pittsburgh and cities like Milwaukee and cities like Philadelphia, why the voter turnout was so low when Trump ran against the first Hillary Clinton, for example. Why was the turnout so low in Milwaukee that it made Wisconsin go Republican versus Democrat? Why was the turnout so low in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh that made Pennsylvania go Republican for Trump against Clinton? That's where it started. And I just think that we need to encourage everybody, and as we celebrate Juneteenth, to keep this in mind. Those people who received a notice 2 years later that they had been freed had to go through so much more than we go through today. I appreciate what they had to go through, and that's why I'm a little bit cynical about offering excuses. Those folks were notified that they were free, and they were still living on land owned by people who were enslaving them. And somehow or the other, they overcame some of those difficulties to continue moving forward. In rural areas of our city, rural areas of our state, we have people who are intimidated, who know that if I want to have this job with the Corps that cleans the levees and stuff like that, I have to go with such and such because he's the son of the police juror. We have it so easy here relative to other places. I just want to use Juneteenth as an opportunity to continue that, my common theme, that we made tremendous progress, but we have a long way to go still. That's all.
We have one more question.
Tony.
Didn't mean to cut you off, Gene.
Tony Hackett.
But I think.
Oh, okay. Hey.
Yeah. I think for those who feel disenfranchised with voting, we need to be looking at how we leverage our money, because even if they don't listen to our vote, they listen to our money. It was an effective strategy during the civil rights movement, and most recently with Target. So in our communities, we need to be galvanizing our community to understand how we can influence our dollars to make them hear us. And then on the back of that, you've got Stacey Abrams, who effectively was able to turn Georgia from a red state purple to blue. So we should be communicating with those individuals who actually have been successful. So most corporations duplicate. They don't create anything new. They take something that's already existent and they figure out how to make it work within that infrastructure. So we should be communicating with those individuals who have been successful, figure out what they did, replicate it here, and then we need to start influencing where our dollars flow. Because if they don't listen to our voice, they will listen to our dollars.
I want to say, though, that that works really well in the city. But if you boycott, well, they don't have too many Targets outside in the rural areas, but they have Walmart. And Walmart has moved into rural Louisiana and shut down local stores. And if you ask people out there to boycott them, then where do they go? In many cases, they don't have anywhere else to go buy grocery out in the hinterlands in Louisiana. And so we have to figure out, not only, I'm agreeing with you, I'm just saying that what we have to do outside of New Orleans is to give people access or information on what else to do. And so earlier we were talking about, not just the city, but even though we're in the city, what else, other places as well, statewide to turn out. And even here, I live across the lake. And there are stores there that if you don't shop, much of St. Tammany Parish is rural. And even though my husband and I just get a kick out of hearing news people say the North Shore, and they're talking about Bogalusa and all that kind of stuff, historically, I see someone else agree. Historically, the North Shore would be the towns on the shore of the lake. Slidell, Macomb, Mandeville, Madisonville, and that. But once you leave there, that's something else. That's not the North Shore. But the news people has everybody saying North Shore all the way up Tangipahoa Parish, Lord knows where. But when you go up in those areas, their options are few, and they are in your television viewing audience. So we have to figure out what are the options when we tell them, talk about your dollars. Where else can they go and get what they need? We're not talking about just, and then some of those places, they don't even deliver. You can't get deliveries out there. And let me just say this is relevant to this. When COVID came, what we learned at Dillard, and I'm sure other schools did, when many of our students had to go home, we learned that, and they were, Dillard had, they did all they could. They gave computers so students could do their workout. They did all of this stuff. We learned that many places don't have internet. How could students get to do their work because they didn't even have the internet? We also learned that many of our students were going home to places where poverty was such that I had students who said, I couldn't come online yesterday, because it was my brother's turn to use the computer. And yes. Exactly. Mhm. That's right. For every area and wherever our reaches are, that we can figure out how to make those things work. But even here in the city, there were so many of our students who did not have internet. They have been working on their phones only. How do you take the test on the phone? How do you do this on the phone? And so we have to figure out, as you said, to meet people where they are. We have to know how to do that. And that is very important in the voting process, that we have to understand that not everybody has a six-figure or even a upper five-figure income in their households and can't get the message out. Or that there are people in terms of voting who hadn't had an experience enough with voting to say that it benefits them. And my last thing on that is that I think that as I referred to Howard Thurman, and he talked about the personal and the collective, how it benefits you, but as you, as a part of society, how could that translate so that it's about everybody as well? Because we can't be one, or shouldn't be one issue voters, because that's not helping anything. You don't want to, I had friends who said, oh, I'm not voting because this person is against abortion. Well, okay, what about all those other issues? And so they may have stayed home for a number of things, of reasons, because of this, that, or the other. We have to show them how that in a democracy is the umbrella, and we're all under the umbrella, and how to meet them and get them to know that we're voting and we're operating in a society for the common good. The common good, as opposed to what's just good for me. Yes, I think the lady right there had it.
Well, we have one in the back, and then Sister Tony, if you don't mind.
And the problem is that we as a people have gotten too satisfied in our communities. When I was a child coming up, My generation is the last generation to know both sides of that coin: segregation and integration. When integration came through, uptown, downtown, back of town, across the river, there were all type of political groups getting the black folks together to get out and do what? Register and to vote. The other thing that I never hear anyone say, more important than federal positions like senators, the president, and all those different positions, most of those positions come from people who have done what? They won elections in their local governments. And all of these people that you vote for in your local governments, they tend to move to the federal level. And you know what they were doing at the local government, so therefore you have a better chance of getting a better life with them at the federal as they move up. And I never hear anybody insist and drive that message in. You got to get out and vote locally, because that is the beginning, and that's where everything starts. And all the people I see at the federal level, I would say 60 to 7% of them held some type of position in their local communities.
Yeah, isn't that the saying? All politics is local, and that has long been the saying that if you people want to know how it benefits them, and hopefully them in the context of their community on the local level, because we're all not in Washington, D.C., we're all not in Baton Rouge, but we need to take it from there. And yes, that hopefully that local elected official who decides to run and who wins beyond that will take the interests of his constituency or her constituency from the local level.
Tony?
A more organized Democratic Party, or there's some apparatus that they have, but there's no reason for us to have to reinvent some of that, because it worked there, and it has successfully turned Georgia from those rural areas as well as the urban areas now get out to vote, now are participating, and that's in despite social media, different ways of communicating, meeting people where they are. Not like when, Nick and I used to be a part of the knocking on doors and when we were much younger, and, that whole GOTV, get out the vote effort. It is different now, but it's been done. And we can do it here if we can take some of those same strategies and use them here.
Yeah, we just have to have the political will, and meaning not just those elected officials, but also those of us in the general population. And it just seems that our Democratic Party here has given in to believing that it can't do it. I mean, you have a very, very strong thing here in New Orleans, but outside of here, it's like, what?
Listen, thank you all very, very much. I heard a couple of things, and if you don't mind hanging in here for a couple more seconds, probably another hour or so, that I would like for you to remind you, refresh your memory, and that we walk away. In terms of how we respond to the question, where do we go from here? There were a few other questions that we wanted to have the panelists address, but I'm so grateful that they took out time out of their schedule. A couple of takeaways is to remember that there's strength in numbers, that this is indeed a numbers game. One of the points that was made that we quite often make is if take the Democratic Party, for example, if every registered Democrat actually voted, the state would turn into a different color. Numbers matter. If a certain number increased, let's just say Pontchartrain Park here, 70126, if numbers increased in this zip code, a significant change will take place. Numbers matter, friend. Technology and the technology divide is another takeaway on responding to the question, where do we go from here? How are we using technology? And also recognizing that there is a technology divide, that what we have in our possession here in New Orleans isn't necessarily what others in rural areas outside of New Orleans have, particularly in the area of technology. And this blessing that we have, that is technology, that can be a double-edged sword. How are we leveraging our technology so that it improves the quality of our lives? And how are we bridging this divide that's not only the have and the have-nots, but what I also heard and what was demonstrated this afternoon is the generation divide and its perspectives. Please remember, friends, that we are not a monolith. We all have a different way of approaching things. And one of the divides that we have to find a way to gap, according to this, is the technology divide. We have in our possession to move forward education. We heard that. And I'm so grateful for our historian who has brought tremendous perspective to us. We also heard from one of our panelists, I think it's something extremely important, and that for us to move forward, there is much healing needed, particularly in New Orleans. And that healing is multi-layered. That we have done great damage. We've had great damage done to us, and we've also done damage to ourselves. I think it's Pablo Freire who says the oppressed will oppress others. And there is a strange way that we have a way of duplicating or repeating behavior that is imposed upon us. So how do we find healing? And in order for us to move forward, healing is absolutely necessary. I'm grateful for the message of messaging. What are we communicating? What are we communicating right now? And with an opportunity to hear information from a councilman, a council member, a historian, a community activist that's boots on the ground, and a pastor. What message are we communicating? And I'm grateful for Brother Jared, who reminds us of the power of our voice. Our voice economically is probably the most voluminous voice that we have. That dollar matters. And thank you to our panelists for providing us with these perspectives as we try to respond to the question, where do we go from here? Community and chaos. I thank you for taking time to come out. And please know that there'll be more conversations like this. We believe conversation produces transformation. And I want to invite you and encourage you, when you hear about this information about conversations here at Bethany, please take time to join us. Amen. Oh. Yes. Listening session. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. 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 Thank you all. Let's show our panelists who are here some love. Yeah, for taking out time. Thank you, and thank you all for coming. Please continue. The festival is continuing. Please take time to take part in a lot of the information is being provided for you this afternoon. And I'm sorry, shameless and shameful plug. We have service tomorrow, Bethany, celebrating fathers at 10 o'clock. You're more than welcome to come. Brother Gary Huntley is our speaker. Thank you. Thank you.
Don't play on